Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at this SpouseLink live stream. My name is Anna Larson. I am the SpouseLink ambassador. If you're getting ready to transition or retire out of active duty military service, it's hard enough just dealing with all the things that the service member has to do. But what happens when you add a spouse, children, and specialized medical or behavioral health needs to that mix? Well, it's Month of the Military Child. Yay, April! Month of the Military Child. And if you're a family with those kinds of considerations and you're facing retirement or transition the next couple of years, you're going to love today's conversation with STOMP instructors Dee Bosworth and Keishawna Smith. We're going to discuss how to maintain services for your child while transitioning from that EFMP DD2792 form and navigating the new medical and behavioral health options that you have that come with your DD214. So I am so excited to be here today. Please, if you're listening, if you've jumped on live, tell us where you're joining from. This is a very interactive conversation. So feel free to drop questions or comments into the comment section. And we would love to hear, what you have to say about the conversation that we're having. Now, I do want to jump right into kind of my guests and who they are and what they're going to be talking about today. So let me pull up their bios here. Okay, so let me start with Dee. So Dee Bosworth, after 13 years of marriage to her active duty sailor, Dee has been a Navy commander ombudsman for 6 years cumulatively while raising their child with exceptional needs. She's a mom, a teacher, a therapy facilitator, and an active volunteer with state and national programs for persons with disabilities. As a political science major and graduate from her state's Partners in Policymaking program, Dee is passionate about advocacy and empowering military families to advocate for a better world for our loved ones with exceptional needs. Yay, Dee. Okay, now Keishawna Smith has 2 children with special health care needs and is the wife of a retired disabled Army combat veteran. Keishawna began working in the disability community when her first child was born at Fort Hood, Texas. That just happens to be where I'm at right now. So we've already got this connection going on here. Since then, Keishawna has worked in a variety of positions supporting special needs, including the Mississippi Parent Training and Information Center, the Mississippi Family to Family Health and Information Center, the Mississippi Sickle Cell Foundation, and the Respite Connection Program. That's a lot of things to be working on. Keishawna is currently a STOMP instructor with PAVE Washington, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about what PAVE is and what STOMP is, so you're going to find out more about that. And then a major goal for Keishawna, and I just loved this part of her bio, but a major goal for her is to help parents and caregivers become better advocates for their children and their communities by assisting them in navigating healthcare and educational systems, accessing resources, and discovering the power of their own voice. I loved that so much. So without any further conversation, I'm going to take this down. I'm going to bring on Dee and Keishawna and say, hello, hi, how are you?
Hi.
Dee, you're muted.
Typical fashion. I think we all live in that mute, unmute mode these days.
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today.
Yeah, so we've got someone from Quantico, Virginia. Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for jumping in. We've got Lee joining us from Alaska. Andrea, who's very excited about this topic. Andrea, I'm so glad we could be here for you today. And then John, who's also very excited for this show. So, and then, we got another one, Deanna, who says, great topic. Yes, I agree, Deanna. And let me tell you why. This is something that I don't think there's a lot of information available on, like not in a single resource. And so it's really hard, all the different places you have to go to figure out how in the heck you're supposed to do this. So I'm really hoping that today is going to help families that have children with exceptional special needs and what they need to do to get ready for this transition or retirement process. So, okay, can we jump right into our conversation? Because we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to start with, I'm going to pull up this. Let me do it this way. All right. I'm going to pull this up. Can you tell me, what is STOMP?
STOMP is actually an acronym. You can see from our logo, it means specialized training of military parents, which tells you the P in STOMP is parents. And we are a parent-focused program. With that, we do work with professionals, particularly military connected professionals, as well as civilian community programs in order to create that relationship, that network with both military and civilian programs. Because it's not, one size doesn't fit all, and one program can't meet all of your needs. So STOMP is actually funded by the Department of Defense. We are a project under the Department of Defense and the Parent Training and Information Center of Washington State, and that is PAVE. And PAVE is another acronym. We live in acronyms as military. It stands for Partnerships for Action, Voices for Empowerment. And within PAVE, we have programs for parent training and information for education, the Family Voices contract for the state of Washington, which is navigating your medical systems, insurance, and everything health related. There are also lifespan respite, which is part of a national program. And again, PAVE is specific to Washington, while STOMP is global. We are connected with all military. STOMP specifically provides free in-seat and virtual workshops of 90 minutes for our webinars or 2 hours for our workshops. We talk on a variety of topics, and we are all about military connections. So that means all branches of service: Coast Guard, National Guard, Marines, Army, Air Force, Space Force, you name it. And we're also related to all status, which means it doesn't matter whether you are active, retired, reserve, or separated. We support everyone. We're non-biased in that way. Truly purple program, right?
Right.
I love that.
Some of our topics fall under educational, some fall under medical benefits like TRICARE, ECHO, ABA, one of the things we'll be discussing, but also the lifespan of services. So we're looking at a lifespan of advocacy and resources and planning ahead, because life happens when you're not watching. And we know as military, we're constantly preparing for the if, but sometimes we miss those things when we're planning for our military life of our greater future and our loved ones, because disabilities don't go away when our service members retire. So that's a little bit about STOMP.
Well, now when you and I talked in advance, Dee, one of the things you did was you sent me these links. I'm just going to pull them up right here. I dropped them in the comments, but this is a digital toolkit, and it's got, I can't even tell you, just this big laundry list of different links that you're going to want to go take a look at. And then there's also a link there for the handouts that you can get from the Stomp training. And so this is just kind of like Dee and Keishawna, your introduction to the conversation, right? And we're going to give you their contact information, how you can find them a little bit later on in the program. But this is a great place to start to just kind of navigate what they offer and really how big this conversation is and all the things that they have that they can help you sort through. So grab those links that I just dropped in the comment if that's something that you're interested in having as part of your toolkit. So, okay, so I think that I love what you guys do. I love what STOMP does and what it stands for. And I love that it's global and all-inclusive. Like you said, a real purple organization as far as that goes. I love that. And so really, I want to kind of go next into what brought you here, your journey as a military family, what it looked like as having a special needs child. So who wants to go first? Let's make Keishawna go first because, just have a little conversation there. So Keishawna, I'm going to put you in the spotlight. Can you tell us what has been your experience as a military family with special needs?
Well, our journey has been a long one. It's still going on. So as you stated earlier, we and I always say we because that's how our military families are. We're kind of one unit, but we've been in the service for a little over 20 years. That includes National Guard and active duty because we transitioned from National Guard to active duty. We were diagnosed when we were pregnant with our first child. through the newborn screening, and which we were at Fort Hood, Texas. And one of the interesting things was I had found out later on that our home state, Mississippi, did not have it on the newborn screening at that time. So just as is, we were able to find out a lot because we were already active duty, because that was just a part of the process that you went through when you were having a child and you were active duty. So we had all the options thrown at us about what we could do ahead of time. We decided that, yes, we're going to push forward, because dealing with a loved one with a disability was not new to me or my husband. I have a loving brother-in-law who lives with cerebral palsy, and we have known each other, our whole lives. So, and then other family members that have had various disabilities. So it wasn't like, oh no, we can't do this. It was just second nature. We all tend to have loved ones that have a special healthcare need or disability. But, we go through this, we matriculate through this journey of active duty life, going from place to place, connecting with organizations so that we have support services that can support our children, support us, to navigate through life, to connect through the community. One of the things that we did, and it was one of my happiest moments at Fort Hood, I noticed that at the clinic that we were going to, there were families coming in and out and really not understanding what was going on, what we were supposed to be doing, like really cognitively understanding how to be a parent with a child with a special healthcare need. So I invited about 10 of them to my home on base.
I love that.
And we just kind of got together and shared resources, shared our experiences, let our kids play together, and just kind of formed a community within that community, because you're going through spouses who are deployed, and so you're initially and intentionally a single parent at that moment. So how do I support myself with a child, and that child has a special healthcare need? Who can I reach out to when I'm stressed? And so that was the reason that we started the group. So I'm not going to say the name that we had because I didn't think of it, and it's probably not good for me to say it live on air. But it was funny. It was kind of an inside joke. But we went through. We were in and out of the hospital with our first child. In her early years, we decided to have another child because, of course, my husband wanted a boy. And so, we were hit with the second news that our child had the same special healthcare need. And so it was par for the course, added to the list. It wasn't, you kind of just try not to skip that beat. And then, there were in and out, like I said, in and out of ER visits, trying to figure out the pain. How do we deal with the pain? How do we deal with infections? How do we live life, to the fullest for our children? And connecting with other organizations. Also, being able to connect with EFMP that was located at Fort Hood for us. That was our connection to the outside community, because you kind of live in the bubble when you live on base. And it made life a little bit easier to be able to reach outside and connect with the community around us for that additional support. My son, he had a lot of issues, chronic transfusions, eventually had acute chest syndrome. And this was a few years back. We came very close to losing him. He was on a ventilator. And then also the dynamic of my daughter having the same special healthcare need, but not quite having the issues that he was having, which brought us into the mental health realm, and juggling her mental health and juggling his physical health. If it wasn't for our first EFMP on Fort Hood, I have lots of great things to say about Fort Hood. Our first EFMP, and when we got ready to move to Tampa, Florida, that EFMP connected us with our next EFMP. It was amazing, and being able to make that connection, because it's scary. It's
Yeah.
very scary, it's an uproar, it's a up, you're moving from one place to the other. The connections that you've already made with specialist doctors or the parents, you're kind of losing that and having
Yeah.
to go to a whole new place. So that was kind of our journey. My son went through the transplant. It was unsuccessful. So we
Well,
kept on moving.
it sounds like like you said, your journey is not over yet. Like you're still living in it, even as a retired military family now at this point in
Yes.
time. But what I love is that from the beginning, you became that resource and that educator and that, I mean, you started a support group, which I just love, in your home on base. I mean, I'm envisioning this in my head, right? And there's
Yes.
so many families out there, I think, that have had this same experience. They're like, where do I even start? So I love that. Okay, I'm going to swap Dee into your spot and let Dee kind of share her experience as a military family.
Well, I have to tell you that my husband called me out because he saw that my bio says 13 years and we've been married 14 years. I am that person in our household. So I've been married to an active duty Navy sailor for 14 years. I married in. He just came up on his 20-year anniversary. Woo-woo! And we thought we were going to get out. So I was about to join this community of retirees and navigating this process. And then COVID. So now we are in for 3 more years and preparing for deployments and sea life and all the joys. But, we began our journey through going through early intervention services. We began our journey when a friend pointed out lovingly in a church nursery that these little quirks and things that I noticed and questioned, but as a first-time parent, didn't feel confident enough to say something is different about my child. She saw them and she said, there is a free screening available to you. It's a state program. It can help him to get a jump on life. And what parent doesn't want that for their child, right? So he was evaluated. And they told me he didn't, at this point, he didn't have a diagnosis. And they said he's not going to be able to receive services. He scored too highly. And so we thought, okay. And as I'm sitting here in this room, my husband deployed, my son's godmother, who thankfully I had met and just became family in the state of Florida, a few months before my child was born. She was sitting with me when they came back in and said, we changed one score. He made it by 1 point. And so at that point I thought, okay, I don't know what this means, but I know we need help. And who do you go to for help? You go to the specialist, right? So being a Californian and never having lived this far from my family, let alone being the first in our family whose child was then diagnosed with autism, the first to navigate this process as a military family, because my dad's service was years before I was born. We didn't live that military lifestyle. My son was later diagnosed with autism spectrum. He was communicatively disordered, language-based learning disability, sleep disordered. So I was not only trying to go through this as a single parent while my husband was deployed, but also being across the country from my family, a family that wasn't familiar with the challenges of military life, and also navigating this process that was not familiar at all, and absolutely exhausted. So I learned to make friends here. As you can tell, I'm a talkative, outgoing kind of person, but I had to learn to allow people to help me and to not compare myself with other parents, because the other parents I saw whose children were thriving, they had family networks close by. They had typically developing children. And there's a saying in the autism community that when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It is a spectrum. But this really applies, I feel, to every diagnosis. It is so different for every household and all of the dynamics that we go through. Now, he was diagnosed at 3.5, and he's now a strapping 9 years old, going on 18 some days, sometimes 30. And he's added some diagnoses. He has asthma, ADHD, some anxieties going on. He's immune compromised. So we still live in a bubble, even though a lot of people are unmasking right now during COVID. We're still kind of holding our breath in some degree. But he's also twice exceptional, which means that he has the challenges of his diagnosis and those symptoms of autism and the other issues, but he is also exceptionally bright. So he has to be challenged, overcoming challenges and then needing to be challenged to keep his interest and stay focused. So that's when I started looking at things, and I realized that my son, I see him as straddling two camps. He has one foot in the autism community and one foot in the neurotypical community because he's not significant enough to fall under a lot of different support programs. His challenges don't meet those requirements. However, he's not typically developing. And so it's been a process of finding what works for him and allowing him to be the individual he is, recognizing which programs can support us and which programs we can be a part of, but then also learning to advocate for those programs that are not built for individuals with exceptional needs, and being able to bring my son into them and create an inclusive environment that meets his needs while allowing him to be a part of that community.
Yeah.
Because right now he's 9, but someday this is going to be his world and his community. So everything I do, everything I've learned along the way has been about helping him to be a citizen and an active member of his community.
I love that. And so, and here's, what, as you were talking, what just popped into my mind was that you're doing this right now as an active duty military family. And so that community and the way the community is, it's very different than, say, a family that's living in the same place for 20 years, right? And so you're navigating this now as an active duty family, but you're 3 years away from retirement. So in 3 years, that's going to change for you. And just like it did with Keishawna, right? When her spouse retired and left the active duty component, that's going to change. So I'm going to jump really quick. I'm going to jump really quick into our next question, which is, how are those medical benefits and programs going to change after that retirement process happens? Like what's going to be different about it?
So it's going to be a little bit of a cold splash of water for you.
Oh no.
but like any cold splash of water, it just opens your eyes a little bit. So it's nothing that, us military families cannot handle. So unfortunately that EFMP goes away. The EFMP goes away. But what I did find was that even reaching back out to the EFMPs that were on the local bases, you've already formed these relationships. So it's not like they're standing over there going, bye, see you later. But it's not guaranteed for you. So make those relationships while you can now. The Echo Supplement Plan, unfortunately, it goes away. TRICARE options are now limited to Standard, Prime, or the U.S. Family Health Plan. And you should have the option to identify you now have the option to kind of individualize that TRICARE plan. So, for example, my husband accesses the VA. My son, who is our youngest, he is on TRICARE Prime. Me and my daughter are on U.S. Family Health Plans. But it was because of our needs. So we opted to kind of go, okay, this is what we need for him. My husband can go over here. Me and my daughter, we can kind of, roll this way. And financially, it made more sense for us. And as far as the services that were provided, they supported us a little bit better. So don't think that your plan has to be across the board. Everybody's on the same exact thing, but you do have that option. So that can be good, and that can be a headache sometimes. Yeah. But being able to have that option, I thought was great, but you do have to read those plans and understand what those are. The care coordination is more on the family than it is with the support services that are on base. So be ready to jump in. Start jumping in before you retire. Dee is a great one. Me and her have conversations all the time, and she's a great care coordinator for her family, and we kind of get in that mode of being able to do that with our families, because we have to coordinate so many other
Yeah.
things, the social part, the emotional part. So yeah, those are some of the things that will change, but you want to reach out, find those resources. You know, I always give a little tip to people that are transitioning from active duty to retirement, is that for every service and support that you find on base, look outside in your local community, because you
Yeah.
can find something. If it's not providing the same, it's very, very similar, and giving you that family support.
So if I'm going to throw a little wrench in the question here, because this isn't something we talked about, so I'm kind of throwing it on you blind here.
Okay.
But so retiring family now has access to like post-retirement TRICARE, but a transitioning family that hasn't reached maybe that 20 years is now not eligible for TRICARE services in any shape, right? So now they're looking at a completely different healthcare system. Is there anything that you would say to a family dealing with that would be different than what you just said to a family retiring out of the military? Or
So
is it
yeah.
really about, yeah.
Well, if I'm talking to a family member that is going back into the workforce, it kind of depends on what their scenario is.
Yeah.
A lot of times, if they haven't reached that retirement stage and they go back into the workforce, and it's a matter of looking over the insurance options that you have, whether it's with the ACA, getting it offline, or whether it's with the company the company or department that you go with. Let's check out and see and kind of go through that policy and see what supports you. It's going to be that same mentality, just a different program. Also, being able to check into those social services like Medicaid, and applying for that and seeing if that's something that fits your family. Again, like TRICARE, where we're on U.S. Family Health Plan, my son is on Prime. Medicaid is kind of the same way. It may be your son, it may be your child on Medicaid, but you may have Blue Cross Blue Shield, or whatever. Not endorsing anything, but whatever insurance that you have access to through, whether it's your job or, again, where you've gone online and just gotten your individual insurance. So the conversation is very similar but slightly different.
Right. So it's not so much the insurance company that you're with, it's more about being the care coordinator, connecting with those communities, finding that connection with wherever you're going to end up being, so that you have that support built out that you did have previously, maybe in your military community or with EFMP and the families that you've associated with there. That's
Absolutely. Those local services, those local organizations, right there in your community. Exactly.
Yeah. So that takes us to the next question, which is, for these families that are facing this now, what kind of documentation do they need to have available? And we actually made a little slide to make it easier for people so that they could be like, oh, that's what I need, right?
That is fantastic. It's always great to have a checklist. I love it. So you want to have home files, copies in your home files, copies of, if your child has an IEP or a 504, those evaluations, diagnoses, make a running list of the services and support that you currently are receiving. Get those contact names, those contact numbers, have them, written down, or if you're like me, I put everything digital. So being able to access that digitally at a moment's notice. Also, those emergency numbers. So if you're especially if you're transitioning from one state to another, you want to know, who do I contact if I need refills? I have wasted so much medicine just knocking it over when I was younger, and having to get those accidental refills. What is the process, and knowing that ahead of time? A list of your medical equipment. Also, is it going to be packed, is it going to travel with you, or is it going to be loaded onto the nice truck that they give us to move our stuff? You need to know those types of things. Also, managing a move has its challenges. So when adding in that care for complex needs of your children, it can be really overwhelming. So, and I say this a lot to people, reach out to those national organizations and those local organizations. So STOMP, F2F, your PTIs. For me, it was a matter of reaching out to the local sickle cell community. There were transition services that were there for us, coming in to help support us and get us going, or being able to access what school is more supportive for our kids, or more understanding, or that knows the 504 and IEP process. So I don't have to come in and teach and then get my IEP and then get my child's IEP. So those are kind of some of the things. And you can access great tools on the Stomp website, like the medical care notebook, the educational notebook, to help you organize yourself. If you're someone that needs a little assistance with, knowing how to organize that. So there's some great things on the website. I think you gave them access to the link, and those tools will be there for them. Also, the Padlet. We've got some great resources on there also.
Yeah, I did drop that link in there. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you just look through the comments, and it is on all of the 3 different streams that we're going to right now. So thank you, Keishawna. Okay, we're going to just switch gears just for a second, and we're going to really quickly talk about ABA therapy. I know this is, well, I don't know this. I only know this because of talking to you ladies, that this is kind of a hot topic right now. So when you're getting ready to transition or retire, how can you continue to receive those ABA therapy services?
Well, as I mentioned, my son has a diagnosis of autism spectrum, so we live in these services. So there's some good news, and that is, once upon a time, ABA fell under the TRICARE ECHO program. But as Keishawna shared earlier, upon retirement, you're no longer eligible for EFMP, although you can still possibly get supports, community and family supports on base or on installation. But if you're not eligible for EFMP, you're not eligible for ECHO. Well, as of 2014, ABA is now under the Autism Care Demonstration. It's under a separate body, and this is a congressionally managed plan, just like all of our benefits. Now, there are positives and negatives to that. The good news is that upon retirement, when suddenly our children are magically cured of all of their ills, right? Well, unfortunately, that is not the magic wand world we live in. But upon retirement, your dependents, not just children, but your dependents that have a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and require ABA services to learn skill deficits or to manage challenging behaviors that impact their quality of life, they can continue to be eligible and continue receiving ABA services despite retirement. It just goes, it eliminates those 2 preliminary steps of EFMP enrollment and ECHO enrollment. Now, here's where it's a hot button issue. ABA in 2021 went through a host of changes. Again, these are all congressional changes, which means that it literally takes an act of Congress to make an impact. There are now certain requirements to obtain and maintain ABA services. Namely, there are parent stress index forms that are now required every 6 months. There's now an autism services navigator role that is assigned to those who are new to ABA, and TRICARE has clearly defined that as being a gap of 12 or more months in services, or brand new to it, having never received ABA. We do talk a lot about ABA because TRICARE specifically has a plan that provides these services, and it is the only plan that is explicitly for autism. However, there are other services, and we know that ABA, again, has a contradictory, controversial opinion. So we're sensitive to the fact that not every family is interested in that, but we know that TRICARE allows that. Other services might be cognitive behavioral therapy, emotional freedom technique, that's EFT, other services provided under psychology or other supports. But ABA is the only scientifically based, peer-reviewed, research-driven service that is accepted by the Defense Health Agency, which is why we spend so much time talking about it. So in recent days in particular, I know there's a TRICARE post that has blown up with opinions and insights from families. And, one of the things about STOMP is we're all about amplifying family voices. Not the program family voices, but the individual voices involved, because we're all experiencing different things, but our benefits are managed by legislators that come with their own experiences and knowledge, but also their own experience and knowledge deficits. Going through partners in policymaking for my state, that was one of the things that really stuck with me through 6 months of learning and diving into my state legislation. They had us profile our legislators. And it really impacted me when I realized that the decision makers for my county, my area, had no experience with military, no affiliations, no awards, recognition, experience volunteering, none of that to connect them to military or to individuals with disabilities. They cannot be held accountable for not knowing what they don't know. Yeah. So part of our job as parents is advocating. And I don't mean that in the legal sense of going into a courtroom, although sometimes we do that as parents too, but in the sense of educating others, making them aware. And in order to bring changes to programs like the Autism Care Demonstration, again, touching on that hot issue, we have to share our voices. And whether you're retired or active, guard, separated, it doesn't matter. Your voice is still impactful. So that's one that I can't express enough. The good news, again, is that requirements for those that are retiring or separating out or have, in order to obtain and maintain ABA, are the same, except for the EFMP and ECHO enrollments. But the bad news is they're the same, which means you're going to encounter the same challenges, and I'm going to tell you the same thing. Share your voice, share what's happening, and educate your legislators on the things that they're not aware of. Do it respectfully, but make yourself heard.
Yeah, that's great, Dee. I really appreciate that. I think it's very difficult because you're already carrying so much on your shoulders, right? That you're dealing with just as a family in general. And now it's almost become these same families' responsibilities now to make sure everyone understands those struggles that they are dealing with. I can't imagine the weight of that feeling. So anyone who's watching the replay or watching live right now, I highly encourage you to reach out to STOMP or similar organizations, to help your voice be amplified like that. I just think that's such a great message. In fact, our very next thing we're going to really talk about really quick is we're going to throw out some resources for families. So let me pop that slide in really quick. I'm going to add it here. If you could just go through and just talk about some of these programs and resources that families have access to and how they can support what you're talking about now, right? Amplifying their voice.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I want to note, and I'm going to give you a link, is that, Medicaid, this is a program that you may be eligible for whether you are retired or enlisted. There's a Medicaid spin down that means an individual whose family makes too much money to make them eligible under the means tested side, meaning not enough money to meet their medical needs. We may, as military, generally, we're not eligible. However, there's a spend down option that we talk about in our workshops that may be able to help them to obtain those services. Due to COVID, Medicaid may actually be an avenue for providing recovery services as a result of gaps in IEP-related services, meaning special education during the pandemic and distance learning. So thank you. I see that you shared that link. I think using your respite is essential. We have respite that is military connected, whether you're EFMP eligible or under the ECHO program. But for retiree and reservists, reach out to your community-based services like Lifespan Respite or the ARCH National Respite Network and Resource Center, which Lifespan is one of the programs under them. National disability organizations like the ARC, Autism Society, Down Syndrome Association, Keishawna's mentioned sickle cell. There's so many different diagnosis-specific as well as disability-oriented programs that you can still get services under. And, Keishawna, you are much better to speak to the family voices and all of these medical programs. So I'm going to kick it over to you.
Sure, no problem. You hear me say community resources all the time, and local community resources, because I mean that's what's gonna feed you. That's what's gonna get you really involved in your community at whatever level you want to be involved. So family voices, and not just the voice of the family, actual family voices organization, national organization that advocates and educates. And that's the piece that I love, is that education. Because like Dee said, you don't know what you don't know. So learn it. Also, F2F, helping you navigate through the medical side. It's very different navigating in education than it is on the medical side. So the F2F being able to support you there. Those family ran organizations, like your local, well, for me, it was my local sickle cell community. Also a couple of organizations called TLC that was specific to where we were, that provided respite for families in the state that we were located in. And we were able to access that. And that was whether we were active duty or whether we were retirees, whether we were National Guard or military affiliated or not. A lot of people know the Head Starts, but they don't understand where the Head Start kind of is housed. And those are your CAP organizations, those community action programs. They offer more than just Head Start, which is great. I also sing the praises of Head Start. But they have other organizations to help with housing, to help with light, heating, energy. They have rural area access, because we don't always go retire and go into in the cities. Sometimes we want to live out in the country. We want a little space. We've been living on base right next to people. So they have those other supports so that you can live where you want to live. You can be a part of the community that you want to be a part of. And don't forget your state organizations, like your state health department. A lot of them, they'll have their SHINS program. They may be called different things, but their children and youth with special healthcare needs programs. They do have age restrictions because they are children and youth. But, if you're falling into that group, they're great state resource to utilize. And then for involvement, engagement, or other services, again, reach out to those local nonprofits. There's not always just a bank of where you can, I can just Google and say, nonprofits that'll help me. And, the list will just pop up for you. It does take a little research. So don't give up. Don't get, disappointed, because one resource will lead you to the next and lead you to the next and lead you to the next. And then don't forget your schools. Your schools are resources also. They're connected in the community that you're going to be living in. So connect with those educators, those administrators, the janitorial service, the cafeteria workers. They live in that community. They know what's out there. So, use those resources that are available to you. We as military families, we tend to want to do it on our own and forge on our own. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with support. Me and Dee have been doing this a long time. And even there are days that I just reach out to Dee for support and vice versa, and we're across the country from each other.
Exactly.
So don't be afraid to reach out.
Now, Keishawna, you mentioned, people settle down where they want to settle down. So one of the important things to know when you're transitioning military is that if you decide to retire overseas and your loved one has been receiving SSI benefits because they're under the age of 18 on command sponsorship orders, well, retiring overseas will now stop those SSI payments until they come back stateside, reestablish residency, and then they can begin to continue those, or they can restart those services or those payments. Medicaid is another one that, depending on where you're settling down, you need to stop and look at the age of eligibility for state waivers, where to access them and apply, and then what it's going to take to establish residency in that state to get on that Medicaid wait list. So those are some considerations, again, as we're talking about our retirees and transitioning out. You can do that in advance. How soon can you get the paperwork and identify who has that program?
Yeah. That's fantastic. I love that list of programs that you just gave us. I mean, and it does feel a little overwhelming what you were saying, in terms of like, what you can't just be like programs in my area to support, I mean, that was going to be my follow-up question, and you beat me to it with your answer, right? Because I'm sure that there are, so would you recommend that maybe if they're like totally lost, can they just contact Stomp? Is that one of their options, to just say, hi, I don't even know where to start? What do I do? I mean, that's kind of what you're there for, right? Is to help them, support them through that initial stages, all the stages of that journey a little bit.
Absolutely.
So, okay.
That was one of the first places that I connected with services in my area, because I attended a Stomp training when my son was much younger. And that's where I met our Parent Training and Information Center and really found out more about what EFMP is, as opposed to just something I had to, register for.
Yeah. And can I tell you something kind of funny? The whole reason I even approached UD and Stomp in general was because a friend of mine knew the topic I wanted to discuss today and said, about 10 years ago when I was at Fort Hood, I went to this Stomp training and it was really good. And I was like, what is Stomp? Right. And then she sent me the information. She said, I don't know if it's there anymore. So I started researching, and that led me to you and this conversation. And that's really how it goes, right? I mean, it's those connections that we make along the way. And just because we're retiring or transitioning out of the military doesn't mean those connections have to stop, but they are going to be formed differently, I think, is the best way to say it. They're going to be formed differently, and you're going to have both opportunities for longevity that you didn't have before. But then there's also probably some, some negatives. I'm going to just call them negatives, whether they're negatives or not, right? Like cons or difficulties, maybe is a better word. Challenges. We'll use the challenges. My brain's like, what's the right word here? But there's also going to be challenges with that longevity and the leaving the military that are going to also crop up as you go. Well, we're not going to leave everyone who's watching or catching the replay. We are not going to leave you empty-handed. Keishawna and Dee have actually come up with 4 action steps that you can start taking right now. If you're 2 to 3 years out, it is time for you to start looking at what you need to start to gather, what you need to start to do to get your child's medical and behavioral services transferred with you smoothly. I'm just going to jump in here. One really quick story. When we retired from the military, and we have no special services that my family needs, but when we retired out, I went 4 months without an ID card, which meant 4 months with no medical services available to me. I couldn't go into a doctor. I couldn't see one. I couldn't even get on post because the wait time between getting my retired ID and my active ID was 4 months. Now, I can't imagine that happening when you have a child or a family member that has services that are, you can't wait 4 months for. I can't even imagine if any of my children had needed to see a doctor in that 4-month time period, there literally would have been nothing I could have done about it. My spouse would have had to take them with his retired ID because they just gave one to him, but I had to wait until the ID card office opened up and allowed me to come in to get one. So I know that this retiring process can be super frustrated, and these are the kinds of things, these are the horror stories, right, that we hear where a family now is in desperate need of services and can't access them because that retirement process has somehow been difficult or failed them in that way. So let's go to your action items. So as families near this point, there's nothing like that stops them from getting what they need. Let me pull this up again, and I will let one of the two of you speak to this.
Go ahead, Keishawna.
So organizing, keeping copies, those hard or digital copies for your care notebook and educational notebooks, as we talked about earlier, is a great way to organize yourself. Because like you said, it can be and upheaval for you. Just moving period is, exhausting as is. And then couple on all the things that come with being a military family. And then couple on all the things that come with being a family with loved ones with special healthcare needs, and planning for all of that long list. Have a way to organize you, because there are going to be moments that you are going to fall onto the couch face first and just take a really deep breath and have a respite moment. So being organized and being able to get to that information quickly is going to help alleviate a little bit of the stress.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. And I think it's important with all of these things, it's all about documenting, being prepared, having everything together. And this all counts toward preparing for your child, preparing for their future. It's the same concepts we use, regardless of what our topic is. We're always talking about documenting and preparing and planning for the day when we're not there, whether it is we're going to a different school and we have a different teacher. We're going to leave that classroom. So what did they need to know about our loved one? Someday we may not be there as parents to support our children. So we have to do what we can to have everything in place, documented for them to receive those services. And, all of these conversations that we have, whether it's in a room like this together, a virtual room like this, or whether it's with a doctor, with a teacher, it's all about advocating and preparing for the future. So, the battles that we're fighting today are battles that either we're going to return to in the future or another family is going to enter into in their future. So it's essential that we don't back out and avoid these challenges and just wait until the next PCS or wait until they get a little bit older and then we'll start looking into these services. That battle isn't going away. So the sooner that we can connect with others that can empower us and support us along the way with that information, the sooner we do that, the better it's going to be for this long range battle of supporting our loved ones with special needs, as well as getting us prepared for the day when we're no longer military connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Keishawna, what would you say would be kind of your final thoughts that you would leave with a family getting ready to go through this process? I mean, I love the D's, right? The battle's not going away. Like, get yourself ready,
Oh yeah, D wraps it up for us pretty good. But that ever ready being prepared, whether you're the service member or the spouse, you hear it all the time. And I mean, you hear it because it's useful. Be prepared. Don't, like Dee says, don't wait till that last minute to say, oh, we'll do this later or we'll put it off till then, because that builds on the stress.
Yeah.
Reach out, make those connections in the community. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid. There is a stigma that, oh, military families are all taken care of. They don't need anything. Bust right through that stigma. Reach out, say, no, that is not what it is. Help us out. And again, document. I cannot say it enough to document everything. Make sure those IEPs are up to date. Make sure that 504 plan is up to date. Even if you're not transferring, say you are one of the ones that get to stay exactly where you are. Your kids don't have to go to a different school. Your spouse is just coming out of military service and going into wherever he or she is going to go. And you're staying in that same home, that same community. Still do those same procedures, make those same documents, get those same copies, reach out to those providers, make sure everything is in order, because it will change. Even staying in the same location, lots of things will change for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so I want to move on and make sure that everyone knows how to connect with Stomp. And through Stomp, then, of course, the two of you. So can you tell everyone how they can find you?
Absolutely. You have our website there to access our training calendar, which is our webinars and workshops. You can access our email. Stomp, again, is a program under PAVE, the Parent Training and Information Center of Washington State, which is why you have that WA, PAVE. So we have videos on the YouTube that are easily accessible to anyone, but we're also on Facebook. I think that's where we're most active as a STOMP project. We have both the Facebook fan page, which is at STOMP Project, as well as a group on Facebook. And that, if you go to your Facebook groups, you'll see it as STOMP-Hub. And we put resources in there pretty much on a daily basis as we find out about different advocacy efforts for military families, different programs that are for all branches, as well as branch specific. We throw it all in there. So it's a mess of information, but it's a constant outpouring and a place to connect and get those answers.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I just want to thank Dee and Keishawna for being on with me today and talking about this important conversation and just giving families a starting place, you know, a place that they can be like, okay, I can do this. Military families have done this. Keishawna's family has done this. Dee's family is getting ready to do this. You know, I mean, this is like, I know, sorry to be the
I know.
You know, just bring it down a little bit, right? Like, oh, yes, I am. But yes, you can make this transition. It can work for your family. And when you find those moments of frustration, that there are people that you can turn to say, I need help, or I need support, or just talk me through this process one more time because it's not working the way I thought it was going to work. And I think that's really in all the transition struggles, that's what I hear the most is, I thought it would be like this and it's not working out like this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to thank you so much for joining me today and for all this information you provided our families, our military children through transition and retirement. It is such a fitting topic for Month of the Military Child. So I'm really glad you were able to join me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Ann. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Now, for anyone who's out there watching, this is a SpouseLink live stream, and SpouseLink was created in 2012 by the American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association, or AFMA. And really, it is just to connect military spouses with information that matters to them. We've started this live stream series for military spouses who are nearing retirement, right in the middle of that transition, or just on the other side and still kind of navigating that whole new world of transition, retirement, and what that means to their family. So come find me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, or go visit SpouseLink. You can find them at spouselink.afma.com. Or on Facebook or on YouTube. We air all of these things on there as well. So I just want to say thank you for joining us. We will see you actually next Thursday. I have yet another SpouseLink live stream that is going to be talking about special needs. And we're going to be talking about school-age children, teenagers, and then adult children with disabilities, and transitioning with all of those three age groups and what kind of resources and things you need to be thinking about for those different arenas. So hopefully you can join me again next week. And just to go ahead and close out, Rebecca says, thank you, ladies. Great info. I 100% agree. So we will see you all next week. Have a great day.